Hey, Dan, welcome to the show. I'm so grateful that you took the time today to speak with us.
Thanks, Brian. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and we just saw each other last week. We were at a super awesome event in Rhode Island, and before we get into the topics today, which are going to be super awesome, um, I just wanted to say something to you. And there's no better. I've never said this to you before, and there's no better time than the present. But
Well, you're saving it for right now
I'm
in
saving
this
it for
very
right
public
now.
moment.
I'm saving it for right now on the show because I've had you and I have worked together quite a bit. And I was thinking, I was like, you know what? There's people in your life that just have a very profound impact on you, like people that you'll never forget. People who will ask you the difficult questions, people who will kind of really put you out of your comfort zone and get you to the point where you're moving towards growth. And Dan, you're one of those people for me. And
Wow.
I just want to
Wow.
say thank you. I've
Wow.
never
Thank
said
you.
that to you before, and I just wanted to
Thank you.
say
That's
thank you.
huge. I thought you were going to say at the end of that, and you were almost one of those people, but you've been forgettable,
Yeah, yeah,
that was all going to be a setup.
yeah, yeah.
No, thank you. That means a lot. I had somebody tell me one time that this kind of work,
Mhm.
which is the kind of work that you're in, which is how do we help people accomplish their dreams? I think Zig Ziglar once said, "You can have anything you want if you help enough people get what they want." And I love that idea, and honestly, it's such a rewarding game to be in. And I just feel really lucky that I get to be in that game. I don't know how it happened. It kind of happened by accident to me, I think, but I feel really grateful. So thanks for saying that.
You got it, and thank you again. And that's a good segue into what we're going to talk about. Was you have the best job title I think I've ever heard. Right? How does You're a dream manager, and how does one become a dream manager, and what exactly is that?
Okay, so yeah, so I about it's been probably 10 years ago that I got invited to be what was called the dream manager for a small company out of Chandler, Arizona called Infusionsoft. It's now
Mhm.
called Keep. And the CEO kind of came to me and said, "Hey Dan, we want you to um, help our employees identify, articulate, and accomplish their personal dreams." So they had a core value that was, we believe in people and their dreams. And it didn't make sense to turn to their entrepreneurial employees and say, we believe in you, and then turn to their actual employees and
Yep.
say, hey, sit down, shut up, and do what we tell you to. So they had this whole program that was designed to help their employees to dream bigger and then go about the process of accomplishing those dreams. And my job was to facilitate that program. And as a result of that, I had a chance for years, to ask people, what's the dream, and to help them make that dream come true. And we were able to accomplish dreams from, I mean, everything from really small things like, I've always wanted to buy an Xbox, to really big things that were like, I want to adopt a child or buy a home or start a business. And so it was everything that you could imagine. And it was just a fantastic position to be in. And so from that point, ever since, I've kind of been in this dream space of like, how do we help people accomplish and really articulate and make real change in their life when it comes to pursuing dreams?
It's such a super awesome thing to think about, because it's my belief that either, and you'll have some insight in this, I know, either we're not dreaming enough as human beings, or we're maybe keeping the dream a secret, like we're keeping it to
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. So um the truth is that most human beings, there are different types of human beings, that we all come kind of half baked when it comes to dreaming, because there are really two parts to dreaming. Part one is the imagination part. It's the part where we can see this vision of the future, and we can kind of romanticize and fall in love with the future events. We can say, oh man, I can picture a world in which
Mhm.
I'm on the top of the Eiffel Tower, and I have a piece of paper, and I write the meaning of life, and I throw it in a paper airplane, and it lands on the lap of an old man. And like, we can see that whole vision of the future. So there's part of us that are in that category. And then the other half of dreaming is execution. Like, all right, day to day, grindy, get to work execution. And even though, there's this huge spectrum from one end to the other. And so some of us dream a lot, but execute very little. And some of us are very good at execution, but kind of lack imagination in what we want to go chase down. And it's those who are able to find the balance between the two, which allows us to both imagine and to get to work, that are able to actually make change in our life. And so, depending on who you are, you might be dreaming a little too much, and others might not be dreaming enough.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like, and when I say dreaming too much, it's not that they have too many dreams, it's that they spend too much time in the dreaming side of things and not enough time on the execution side of things. And they know who they are. If they're listening right now, they know who they are, who are really good at having great goals and aspirations, but very poor on the execution or follow through.
Yeah. I definitely know who I am. And you've
Yeah.
helped me.
Which side are you on? Are you more execution or more imagination?
I am more imagination, and we learned that.
Yeah.
I've learned that through you. I mean, I mean, for those who are not watching on YouTube, I mean, the 3-year vision that you helped me with for my real estate business earlier this year is on my wall, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Is that it right behind you? That's
that's
cool.
it, right behind me. And I look at it every day, and it essentially says, like, I'm the visionary looking for my implementer.
Yeah.
That was what I got out of that. You helped me with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the truth is that, again, like, we, as we mature, we should become more centered.
Mhm.
As we grow older, we should become more centered. Like, if we're kind of visionary, we kind of learn some skills. I mean, here we are doing your thing, chasing the dream, and but we'll all come a little half baked. And so, depending on where you're at, you might need a little bit more, spend a little bit more time imagining, and or a little bit more time just grinding it out.
Yeah.
Depending on who you are.
I once heard you talk about when you became the dream manager at Infusionsoft, which is now Keep. You used to go around to the employees and literally ask them,
Yeah.
like, "Hey, what's your dream?" And then a lot, for the most part, most people knew their dream, right, or some variation
Yeah.
of it. Most people didn't know. Most people knew, right?
Yeah. I mean, we all, like, let me just define dream really quickly and then I'll answer your question. So, a
Yeah.
dream is simply something. So, we all have this kind of biological tendency to live rather boring or humdrum lives. We're like the deer on a path that if we wander down to water, we get water, we successfully get water, we wander back home and we don't die. We're going to follow that same path again and again and again and again. And that's what happens in our brains, that we literally create these paths in our brains. And so we are creatures of habit, and we're creatures of, and we optimize for survival. And just like the deer, if we don't die, we stay on the same path over and over again until eventually a little path or a rut is created and we want to stay there. So dreaming is simply identifying things that are desirable that we would want that aren't on our current path.
Mm.
It's articulating desirable things that aren't on our current path that we want. And so we all have something like that, right? We all have a car that we want. We all have like, as human beings, we naturally, like, so naturally have this tendency to say, hey, I want something more. And so everyone has a little bit in that category. But some people have a hard time even articulating that. I've met plenty of people that when I say, what's the dream for you? And they kind of go, well, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I mean, and that can happen for one of two reasons. Either that dreaming DNA in them has gone dormant, from become calloused over time. Like, there's no way I could possibly have the things that I'm really dreaming of. And so it just becomes callous over time. And then the other type is, I'm just really good at execution. My imagination is just really small. And so I have a hard time imagining something bigger.
So, okay, awesome. So step one seems to be fairly common, or most people know their dream. So where do people get
Yeah.
stuck? And, I have this dream, like what's the biggest roadblock?
Yeah. So it's a great question. The most common thing that happens is we have dreams that ping our brains all the time. Just scroll through social media, you'll see and have this little ping of envy show up where you're like, and you'll compare yourself and you'll feel a little less than, and you'll feel a little bothered. And this is why social media is so anxiety inducing. And so where do people get stuck? Well, the first thing is that they dismiss dream possibilities. So if a dream is simply a possibility, they dismiss possibilities without consideration. So think about this. If I said today, if I were to ask our imaginary audience here, like, how many of you would want to go to Fiji next week? By raise of hands. Like, we would all, like, there'd be very few that would say, if everything worked out, my job were on hold, I got a plane ticket in the mail, it said, hey, go to Fiji. Like, there are very few of us that wouldn't take that offer, right?
Mhm.
And yet the possibility, and is it possible for us to go to Fiji next week?
100%.
Sure. But we dismiss that idea without even really considering it, without even really giving it a real kind of a real consideration, where we go, well, should we go to Fiji next week? Let's look at plane tickets. How much would plane tickets cost in Fiji? And like, what would be the actual possibility of that happening?
Mhm.
And we actually start to build out the plan that would make that reality. And then we make a legitimate decision about whether or not we could actually make that happen. And so far too often, we just dismiss the idea without consideration. I'll give you a specific example from my own life. So when I started my business, and I graduated as a dream manager, I left that company and I started consulting small companies across the country and helping individuals accomplish dreams. So I started my own little consulting firm. Well, literally the day after I started my consulting firm, my wife came to me and she said, hey, Dan, you know how you don't have to go to a job anymore? You know that? You know how you're not tied to a desk anymore? Isn't that exciting? We should go on a tour of the country. We should just uproot, we'll homeschool the kids, and we're just going to cruise around the country. I've always wanted to do it. Now's our chance. Well, immediately, even in the dream manager's brain, my thought was, you can't go on a long trip right after you start a business. This is like the time where there's less money rather than more. And I immediately dismissed the idea. Well, luckily my wife was like, hey, aren't you the dream guy? This is my dream. And that's like, I'm stuck at that point. And so we started actually considering it.
Yeah.
And we found out that we could rent homes across the country for about what we were paying in rent and utilities in our current home. So there wouldn't be an additional expense. We found out that we could fly most of the family across the country for like $200. It was like super cheap flights. Like we just found all these little details. When we actually went to consider it, it was totally possible. And we did it, right? 9 months later, we pulled back into our driveway. And so too often we just dismiss the possibility, really out of fear, which was my initial response to that. I don't think we could afford it. And all these fear tracks start running. But we dismiss that possibility without even really considering it. And so that's probably the primary reason, is that we never even give it a chance to be real.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And what you just described, and I've heard you tell that story before, making it happen sounded so simple. It didn't really sound all that challenging. I'm sure that you had some moments and roadblocks along the way.
That's the
but
funny thing. I would always say, dreams in the mirror are closer than they appear. It's like we actually are far closer to the dream, that our brain tends to exaggerate the challenge, exaggerate the danger, exaggerate the risk. And so when we actually go pick it up, it's easier and faster and less scary than we maybe thought it would be.
Yeah.
It's not always true, but it's often true that dreams are a little closer than they would appear.
Any other fears beside that you see in your experience, your vast experience, other than, the money fear is a block for pretty much everyone, I think, especially when you're talking about leaving your job.
Yeah. So this is an interesting part, because inevitably I'll say, so what's the roadblock? What walls do we have to jump over in order to get going on our dreams?
Mhm.
And the truth is, it's never resources. It's never resources. And so because if our dream requires more resources, what's the first step on the path to accomplishing our dream? Going and getting more resources, right? It's like, okay, that may be one of the steps on the path to accomplishing the dream, but it's not the roadblock. It's like the beginning. Okay, great. Yeah, I want to buy this car. Okay, you need more money. All right, now let's begin the process of pursuing that dream, and the way we begin the process. So it's never that. The really only roadblock, I forget who was it that said it? Was it FDR that said there's nothing to fear but fear itself?
Yep.
It really is just we're scared. We're the deer on the path, and we're afraid that if we leave the path, we'll die. And it's this visceral, a mammalian brain kind of moment. And we say, no, stay put. Because if we chase that dream, we're going to die, and we don't want to die. And so it really is as simple as that. It's avoiding pain and avoiding discomfort. And we like kind of our current condition, and we optimize for survival.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you clarified that. So it's what stops us is us, right? And I love
Yeah.
the path thing. You told this super awesome story last week, and I was hoping you could share it because I really do think everyone needs to hear it
Yeah.
about the people bungee jumping, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
on the
yeah.
bridge, they're about to jump, and this kind of ties into what you were just talking about. Like when it comes time to jump, most people are afraid.
Eesh. Yeah. So the truth is, oh man, this came back because I had this very visceral experience when I was like 18 years old. And I
Mm.
remember I'm actually a pretty risk averse guy, which is interesting. Like I don't love risk. I'm a homebody. I like staying home. But I got invited when I was like 18 years old to go cliff jumping.
Mm.
No, if any of you have ever done this before, it is a moment you'll never forget, because it puts like your full adrenaline on high alert. And so sure enough, my buddy's like, oh yeah, it's not even that high, just come follow me. And we get up to the top of the cliff, and there we are, a group of guys and girls, and I'm like trying to be all tough and all the 18-year-old bravado, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and and then we get to the edge, and it's like, whoa, that's actually pretty high. And there is a moment in our dreaming lives when you're going to come to the edge, and there's going to be this feeling of like, whoa, wait a second. And it's going to like, you're going to feel it just like you would be on a cliff jump. Now, one of the things that's cool is we were all together in this group, and of course we gather together, and the first question we ask is, all right, who's first?
Yep.
And right. And I'm like, please don't pick me. Please don't pick me. Right. And somebody volunteers from the group. And so finally we're like, oh, that's much better. And they go and they jump off the cliff, they hit the water. But no, what's really interesting is every time they come out of the water, I actually had one guy, I didn't tell this part. I had one guy who said, what I like to do is when I hit the water, I hold my breath, and I just let myself sink to the bottom and wait there as long as I can, so that everyone on top's like, I don't think he made it. I think he's dead, right. I think he's a goner.
Yeah.
And then he pops to the top, right. And so at the end of the day, right, that person comes out celebrating. And oftentimes when we're sitting in our dreaming seat and we're looking around and we see people like you, Brian, you're a great example of this, where it's like, Brian's like, I left my W-2, I've started this new thing, it is awesome. And they come out of the water and they're just cheering. But for whatever reason, that doesn't necessarily take away the fear. Even though we know now it's safe, it's still really scary. It doesn't take away the fear. I'm still like trying to like find my way back at the back of the line. But one by one, people would jump one by one. And it was awesome because there was a group of people that were all kind of cheering each other on, right?
Yeah.
There was one girl at the back of the room, the back of the line, that was like in tears because she was so afraid. And finally, my turn came. And what's interesting is all of your instinct is stay put, don't jump. And then they count down. They're like, all right, 1, 2, 3, jump was the rhythm we created.
Yeah.
And that 1, 2, 3 is a really important phenomena, because that cues you, okay, now it's time. And you make the leap, and it's exhilarating, and the water feels great when you get there, and you feel all this new sense of pride and being alive that you hadn't felt up to that point. All the fear instantly transforms as soon as you hit the water into this kind of really cool exhilaration, right?
Yeah. 1, 2,
And
3.
so
1,
all
2,
of
3,
us,
jump.
and I saw that over and over again when people would get to the very edge of the dream, where it's like, okay, today's the day. We're going to pull the trigger. Every time there's this little jolt of like, oh boy, this is real now. And that's just the deer on the path saying, don't leave the path. And it's very natural. It's very normal. But as soon as you hit the water, it's like, oh, this is actually really great.
Right. It's never as bad as we make it out to be, is it?
It never seems to be.
No. Great. Thanks for sharing, Dan. And I forgot that it was cliff jumping, not bungee jumping. So
I'm sure bungee jumping was the same.
I'm sure it'll be the
I
same.
still have very little of affinity for heights. Like, I'm not sure I'd like to try bungee jumping, but I'm sure this sensation, like bungee jumping, just give you that sensation over and over again, right? Where it's like, whoa, oh no, we're gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm okay. Right.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
Maybe you could give, I know you can, you have several, maybe you give an example or two of, someone that you worked with, right? They have this dream, like whatever it is. I mean, you mentioned the guy that wanted an Xbox or something, and then getting to the point where they actually got the thing, right? Or they lived their dream, and kind of the steps that they went through. Because I think, again, there's a lot of dreamers out there, but they don't know what to do.
Yeah. So that I'll walk you through just a simple kind of step-by-step, right? Like initially we identify the dream and articulate it.
Mhm.
Step one. So what's the dream really in all the details? So I would have people that come to me and say, oh, my dream is to go to a football game. And it'd be like, all right, which one? Or people would say, my dream is to start a business. And I'm like, that's actually not your dream. I know it's not, because we can go start a business tomorrow. It's a business license. We just fill out the form and you've started a business. That's not what you mean, right? What's the real dream? Like, what's the fulfillment or actualization? What's the finish line where you'd say, man, I made it? And we want to articulate that dream. So that's step one. And honestly, most of us don't even do that. Like you said that we work together on a vision for your business. That's the articulation of a dream, is essentially what it is. It's hanging right behind you. And I love that you have it on your wall, because it's the articulation of a dream. And so first step one is really that articulation. And so I still remember that guy who was like, I want to go to this football game. And I was like, which one? An SEC football game. Which one? Well, Alabama, Georgia. Okay, now we're talking. Which year? This year, next year, this year. Great. All right, who would go with you? Would you do tailgating? Like, let's really understand and get clear about what the actual dream is, so that we can now begin to plan around it. So step two then is to put together a plan. Like, what would it take in order for us to go accomplish that dream? What's the price tag on that dream? Now, sometimes you'll articulate a dream and then you'll look at the price tag and you'll go, maybe this isn't really worth that. Maybe this really isn't worth that. And so we kind of go shopping for dreams, right? Just like we would at a store. We find a shirt we really like and we go, this really isn't worth that. And that's fine. And then you trade it in, you keep shopping until you find a dream that really excites you. But we need to understand what the price tag would be. What would it take to accomplish this dream? And then once we've agreed that the price tag is worth the dream, right? That the reward is worth the effort, then we swipe our credit card, which I call declaration, where we get to declare that dream to ourselves and to the world. So we get to say, hey, this is a dream. I'm committed to it. I want to let everyone know that I'm going to go chase this dream down. And that's when it transitions from really being a dream to a goal, where it's like, all right, we got to go get to work on this. And in that moment, now that we're chasing a dream, now that we're chasing a goal, now we need a plan. That plan needs steps, and we have to have a very specific approach to that plan. And then as long as we keep saying, all right, what's next? What's next? What's next? And we keep marching towards it, eventually that dream is going to come closer and closer until ideally, or hopefully, it becomes reality. Now, not all dreams are guaranteed when we start at the beginning of the path, right? I have a buddy whose dream is to be on a sitcom and make $40,000 an episode. And I'm like, that's not, there's no guarantees in Hollywood, as far as I know. But he's marching towards it. And still to this day, still marching towards it. What's next? What's next? What's next? And he is dramatically closer to that dream than he's ever been as a result of his efforts.
Amazing. And you bring up a good point. I'm several that I want to kind of maybe pick apart a little bit more. Number one is small steps and marching towards it. So it's little by little. And I think that and me personally too, I've done this in the past. I'll have this dream or I'll have this goal. Like I want to accomplish this thing, right? That seems so massive that again, you said I dismissed the possibility without consideration. Like this 100-foot
Yeah.
redwood tree that I have to jump
Yeah.
off a 100-story building to tackle, and I just dismiss it. I quit before I even start. And you had just mentioned, I think a lot of people maybe fall into that trap, if you will.
Yeah.
But you said the small steps and the marching towards it. I mean, maybe elaborate further on that because I don't think people get that, Dan.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like we live in a society where most of our view of the world comes in montages. You know that montage in the movie where Rocky becomes really strong when he's out of shape and and it takes like 4 minutes of really inspirational music and then all of a sudden he's ready to like be a world champion. Like the truth of the matter, and this is the ugly side of dreaming, is usually it's like days and days of just normal monotonous work. Most dreams, that's what it feels like. Now there are some dreams that are really fun and exhilarating and they have a very short fuse, meaning takes very little effort, and they have a very short shelf life.
Mhm.
Right. So for example, the dream of like, I want to travel to Europe. Like my family's going to go to Europe this fall. And it's like very short fuse, doesn't take too long to save up for that and get that ready and then put that in the hopper, but it also has a very short shelf life, meaning those memories fade and then it's going to be on to the next thing. And so, but most big dreams, like I want to change my life, I want to change my situation, those dreams have a long fuse, meaning a lot of waiting, a lot of effort, a lot of consistency. But they also have a longer shelf life, meaning if I start a business and I launch a business and that business becomes success and I work to achieve the success of that business, that takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, but now I get that business for the rest of my life. Or if I want to own a home, for example, and it takes a lot of effort to build up that down payment or whatever, and then but I get a long shelf life with that dream. And so we montage too often where we think, oh man, I want this dream, and then we just quit too easily, when really it's just day-to-day consistent monotony moving through. And now if somebody's listening, like if you're like me, you're going to be asking the question, well, okay. It was like one day I asked my mom, Brian, I said, hey mom, how do you get better at something? And she was like, well, you set a goal and you work hard over time and you practice and you get better. And I said, what if you're not good at setting goals and practicing and working hard? Like, how do you get better at that?
Yeah.
And so, and that's where, there are a lot of different ways, but I'll just suggest one way. One, that's why the declaration is so important. So
Right.
number one, it's like, all right, I'm creating social accountability around this dream. I'm going to quit my job on this day. Creates the social accountability. I'm going to lose this much weight by this day. Social accountability. I was on a mastermind call and I told my entire mastermind, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Well, why would I do that? Well, because all of a sudden now I'm a little bit more motivated. I'm a little bit more bound to that dream. The second thing we do, if we're not good at the consistent effort part, is we have to begin to build habit, and we practice the skill of building habit. And we start with small, simple things, and then we work our way up. Simply, like similar, if I went to the gym for the first day and I was doing curls, I would start with the lower weight, and then I would work my way up to heavier and heavier weights, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to be like, dreams take time, and it takes maybe a while to cook, and so we have to be willing to be patient. And we begin to, one, we commit ourselves, and then two, we start with small habits first until we work our way up to bigger ones.
Yeah. The montage thing was great. Rocky always gets ripped six pack abs in 4 minutes.
Like an afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's
No,
not how it works, right, Brian? Like it's a grind to be a dream pursuer. It's hard. It
it's
takes effort.
absolutely hard. It's definitely hard. And as I had said to the group last week, you gotta have a reason not to quit. You gotta have a strong reason not to quit. And
Yeah,
that's your
here, here.
dream. That's your dream, right?
Yep.
So
Yep,
this
exactly.
begs to ask the question because there's a lot of people listening who want to quit their job. Do you think that that's a dream, or is that something else?
You know, quitting the job probably isn't the dream
Mhm.
because otherwise we could do it tomorrow. You just walk in and say, I quit. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Right. It's the landing and where we would land and what that landing would look like that is really the dream. It's that moment where it's like, yeah, I get to wake up in the morning and I get to take my kids to school and I'm there when they get home. That's closer to the dream. And so you just quitting the job is not, I mean, maybe there's like you have like this fancy way you want to quit where you like,
Yeah.
burn down the bridges as you go. I don't know, but really the dream has much more to do with a new lifestyle and new amount of freedom that you're able to enjoy as a result of you leaving the W2. And I would want to get really, really clear on what that looked like and felt like. And the
Yeah.
clearer and more powerful that becomes for you, the more more commitment you can generate, the more motivation you can generate in pursuit of it.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you shared that. I think that it saddens me because I talk to a lot of people when we talk about dreams and goals and plans that they don't have them. They don't have them. They don't spend the time on their life plan or their life vision, as I like to call it. And I know you're big on vision,
Yeah.
but we do this for everything else. We plan everything in our life, right? But we won't take
Yep.
the time to plan the most important thing, which is our dreams and
Yeah.
our life vision. Why do you think? Again, you mentioned the fear thing, but
I
is
think it can be a little scary. I think
Mhm.
it can be a little scary because now we're asking some really deep questions, which is questions like, "Am I worth it?"
Mm.
And who am I to deserve this when my parents didn't have that? Or like, am I being greedy? Am I being selfish? Like, there's all of this. There's a huge load of storyline that can pop up when we start to legitimately um, create an intentional life for ourselves. And, and by the way, most of it is fueled by that same part of our brain that says, "Hey, don't die." And we go, "Oh, well, okay. I don't want to die. So that means I better be like, think the same thoughts that I've always thought, be the same person I've always been. I've always been the timid, shy one.
Mm.
And so I'm going to continue to be timid and shy. I'm not a risk taker. And therefore I'm not the risk taking type. And so we begin to define ourselves, and that is just our way of putting up walls to protect ourselves from potential injury, hurt, or wounds or hurt. And this is deep stuff, by the way. Like as a dream manager, you bump into some pretty deep wounds because the deeper the wound, sometimes the more committed I am to never feeling that pain again. And
Ooh.
so I hang on to my anchor even tighter, like, because if I'm like, I get hurt and then I go, all right, I'm never playing soccer again. Right. Like I got hurt in a soccer game. I broke my leg. It's like, I will never play soccer again. And therefore I'm going to sit on this bench and I'm going to hold on to this bench. And no matter how much you try to put me in the game, there's no way I'm going in the game again. And that's real. That's a real thing. And so, for me, so where do we start? If you know that you're like, that's probably true of me. It's probably true that I'm afraid to believe. I'm afraid to trust. I'm afraid to hope. Um, well, start small. Start small. Um, like identify some dream that would just be outside of your reach, but not too far.
Mhm.
So maybe it's like, you know what? There's this restaurant in town. I had a friend of mine who just shared this with me. He's like, my dream is forever I've wanted to take my dad to a fancy restaurant because we grew up poor and I had a little extra money and I took my dad to a fancy restaurant. And it's like, awesome. That's an awesome little dream. And as you begin to take on these smaller dreams, inevitably the bigger ones start to surface, and you start to have a little bit more belief and a little bit more self-confidence and a little bit more capacity for yourself. And the fear starts to fade a little. And so even if there's a series of smaller dreams that eventually will lead to bigger ones, that's a great place to start.
Mm, so awesome. I love what you said about the soccer thing too, because even if you love soccer, which you do, you love soccer,
Yeah.
you still won't do it because you don't want to get hurt.
I'm gonna hang on, right? And by the way, like you just do, as you talk about these things with people, you find out. Like I remember chatting with a woman who, I mean, she'd recently been through an abusive relationship ending in divorce. And she's like, Dan, what can my dream possibly be? And I'm like, maybe dream right now. It's okay if your dream right now is like feel normal. Like there can be periods of our lives where it's not quite time to dream. It's like time just to settle. And that's okay. And I mean, I wouldn't want to stay there, but sometimes the dream is like, I just want to have a day where I don't feel scared,
Mm,
or I just want to have a day where I don't feel hurt or wounded. Now, I wouldn't hang out there too long because, again, that's where we start to, as soon as we start settling in, that's a good sign it's time for us to move again. And it's time for us to dream again.
yeah.
But no, I want to honor the fact there are some hard things, but most of us aren't suffering from that. That's very rare. Most of us are just bored. Most of us are just settled. Most of us have just been doing the same old thing again and again. And it's time, a definite time for disruption. And that's where dreaming becomes such a powerful tool.
100%. The lesson that you just gave to all of us, I hope everyone heard it, was that dreams come in all shapes and sizes. It doesn't have to be this massive thing, right? It's
No.
yours, protect it, and don't be ashamed of it, right? It's your
Yeah.
dream.
And I remember there's this girl at Infusionsoft. We call her the Dream Slayer. And when she was 8 years old, she'd been in an accident. She was paralyzed from the waist down. So
Uh-huh.
she was in this wheelchair. And she just had this long list of dreams and she just kept checking them off. And I bump into her. How many so far? 25.
Wow.
A few months later, how many so far? 38. My favorite of her dreams was she was able to, she grew up, her father was an immigrant, came to the United States. And she bought him a Camaro for
Mm.
Christmas. And she had it all videoed, right? And he gets this little keychain out because Camaro is his favorite car. And he's like, thank you so much for this keychain of a Camaro. She's like, Dad, it's not the keychain, it's the key. And they walk out in the driveway. And I mean, so it's like, it can be a lot of small things. And I know
Yeah.
sometimes we talk about dreams and we talk about the dream, like capital T, capital D. And it's like, no, it can be something small. And that's where we just start to loosen the cartilage in the shoulder, right? We start throwing again. We start
Yeah.
getting back into life. And those small dreams can do a lot to help us build our confidence and help us believe that we're capable of more.
Beautiful. I love it. Last week, we were talking, I think on one of the breaks, and you came up with this term. I think you remember what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to talk about that? I mean, you ready?
Ripcord protocol. All
There it
right.
is.
So for
So
those of you
awesome.
who are in W2s, I've done a lot of W2 escapes in my dreaming days. And I didn't have a name for it until last week. And I dubbed my process. My process is dubbed Ripcord Protocol. So Ripcord Protocol is when you have a dream to leave your W2. And by the way, I share this with you because I did this. This is how I left my W2.
Hmm.
Is I created what I will now call my Ripcord Protocol. And so Ripcord Protocol, when's it time to pull the ripcord and the parachute sets off and I'm in a different path.
Yep.
And basically here's the Ripcord Protocol process. Step one, you're going to make an exhaustive list of all of the criteria that would need to be met in order for you to turn in, on the day that all the criteria are met, you would turn in your resignation. So like it's going to be this long list of things. It's going to be a list like, how do we do healthcare? I need this much savings. I need this many months runway. I need another source of income. I need this passive income. Like whatever it is, make an exhaustive list. Now, some people, when they make their exhaustive list, it's quasi ridiculous. Like, I want to leave my job and have zero risk.
Yeah. Come
I
on.
want to leave my job with no, like, I want to have $1 million in the bank, and I want to have 10 other job offers. Like, so be like fair with yourself. Okay. Like, understand that there's going to be some risk, and the longer the runway, the longer the list, the longer it's going to take you to get out. So make a reasonable list. Sit down with your spouse, make that list, and you make the list for Ripcord Protocol. Now, then hang that list above your computer or wherever you work, maybe not at work, but at your mirror at home. And basically that's your list of goals. Those are your assignments. If one of them says, figure out healthcare, well, tomorrow I call up an insurance agent. And by the way, it's super easy. You just call up an insurance agent and say, hey, I need to figure out how much it would cost to get my family insured. And this is what criteria we need. And you check that box. All right, I know what that's going to take. And you write a little criteria there. And then you work through your list, and you just start attacking the list one at a time. And the reason this is important is too many people are staying in their W-2 for an extra 3, 6 months, a year after they're totally qualified to leave it.
Yeah.
And so I had a buddy who recommended the Ripcord Protocol. And as soon as that last box is checked, I pull the ripcord and I'm out. And by the way, do you want to know, Brian, how I motivate myself whenever I have a rough entrepreneurial day?
Yes, I do.
All I do is I go to the want ads, I go to Indeed, I pull up jobs I would qualify for, and I start reading job, what do you call them? Job descriptions.
Yeah.
I read the job description, and in about 2 job descriptions, I go, I can never go back to that. I could never go back to that. I love my freedom way too much. And so that's how I motivate myself to stay in that entrepreneurial journey, because it's so much better. Like, come in, the water is warm. It is so nice. I want to be the person who's made the jump, and you feel the same way. You get in the water and you pop out of the water. You're like, you guys, it is so great. Take the leap with us.
Yeah.
And I get it's not perfect, and I get it doesn't work out 100% of the time, but it is far less scary than you think it is. And it's been far easier than I even thought it would be.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. I'm wondering now, I'm envisioning like this, something maybe like a device or like a pinata with confetti in it or something that has a ripcord on it. When you actually pull it, and it, just there it is, right? It's just raining on you, like the balloons are kind of, yeah, you won the Super Bowl type of stuff. I mean,
yeah, let's do like ripcord where there's confetti. Yeah, I see it too. That'd be brilliant. That'd be brilliant. Maybe we should start marketing this. We can sell them on Amazon. Ripcord Protocol.
Awesome.
Devices.
Great stuff, Dan. I think that's a great way to wrap up and leave people with the Ripcord Protocol who want to leave their W-2. It's not as difficult as we make it out. Dan, before we wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share?
Yeah,
Any final thoughts?
I don't know. I just want to encourage. I just want to encourage you to put on your courage. Like, we only get one life, really, and we only get one kind of shot at this. And the thing that there was a little period of time where I was studying end of life confessions, like end of life conversations, where people who are dying, and I was like really curious about what they said. And guess what they didn't say? Right? I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have gotten that promotion. They never say that. Like, we overemphasize these worlds we create in these corporate worlds we're a part of. They're not as important as they seem. They're important. Don't get me wrong. I love a good job. I think it's great to have a worthwhile profession, but not at the expense of family, not at the expense of living life, not at the expense of having a life that you feel like was meaningful. And so I just want to encourage you to put on your courage and to make a list and to get on the plan. Because guess what? Even if it takes you 5 years or 10 years, if you start now and you're working at it, 10 years from now, you're going to be 10 years older no matter what. In one scenario, you're going to be free of that W-2, and in another scenario, you're not. And so even if it takes a long time, let's get to work, start today. Because again, the things that matter most often aren't the things we spend the most time on. And we want to turn that around and start spending time on most of our time on the things that matter most.
Beautiful. That's a great way to end it, Dan. Thank you for continuing to serve me.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for all the
audience.
work you do to make dreams come true, man. I feel like you're a brother in arms, and love the work that you're doing. Love this podcast.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Everyone, make it a great day.